One bitterly cold winter's evening, 5 men were seated together in a small room in a house situated in the Jewish quarter of a busy and largely populated Russian city. The appearance of the room was as wretched as the external aspect of the house itself. The solitary window was totally concealed by a heavy faded curtain depending from the roof, and as the wind moaned dismally through the broken panes of glass, its somber folds swayed to and fro. The inmates of the mournful den were seated round the table, smoking their pipes and talking, as if furtively in whispers. As the feeble rays of the candle fell fitfully upon the company, they revealed the youthful faces of 4 students. The chief spokesperson, however, was a much older man, apparently about 50, with a short pointed beard, shaggy brows, and keenly penetrating eyes of the darkest hue. The others deferentially addressed the speaker as professor, and such, indeed, he was at that time at a well-known school of medicine in Russia. On the present occasion, however, he was speaking not of science, but of the terrible doctrine of assassination. Professor V was a nihilist, a reputed colossal of craft and dissemination of revolutionary doctrines, and on the particular evening in question, he was engaged in advocating, with fiery eloquence, the assassination of a certain colonel who had lately been promoted to the rank of chief commissioner of secret police. As the night wore on, their whispered conversation was suddenly interrupted by a low knocking at the outer door. In a moment, the conspirators sprang noisily to their feet and listened with bated breath. The sound was repeated. A peculiar whisper was heard from without, and the listeners exchanged significant glances and quietly resumed their seats. Presently, cautious footsteps were heard in an outer room. The door was opened, and a young man hastily entered. His face was pale, his manner agitated, and as he returned from companions' salutations, he regarded them with a fixed and angry stare. "You have kept us waiting, comrade," exclaimed the professor, puffing calmly at his pipe. "Ugh, we are almost frozen, for the air of this wretched apartment is quite Siberian. But now to business. We will warm ourselves with talk and fire our minds with the prospects of revenge." There was a murmur of approval. It was noticed, however, that the young man who had just appeared upon the scene took his seat in silence, and resting his elbows upon the table, slowly scrutinized the faces of his comrades. "My dear professor," he said at length, "we cannot possibly proceed at present with this business." "Why not?" was unanimously asked. "Because," replied the latecomer as he snuffed the candle, "because one of us is a traitor." "Traitor!" exclaimed the men, starting to their feet. "Yes, comrade, we are betrayed, and no one knows of this plot of ours except ourselves. It is plain, I think, that one of us has turned informant." "You are mad to say so," hoarsely exclaimed the professor. "But in heaven's name, what has happened? Come, tell us quickly. This is no jesting matter." "Listen then. On my way hither, comrades, I entered Café de Paris to sip a cup of tea and smoke a cigarette. I happened to sit down beside 2 officers of the secret police, and as one of them was somewhat tipsy, I could distinctly hear his voice. I found it rather interesting. He told his companion that he was under orders to surround this old deserted house at midnight — it is near 11 now — and to arrest all persons found within. He mentioned, moreover, all of our names, and added, with a maudlin laugh, that the certain person, to whom the administration is eternally indebted, would be found in our midst playing the part of conspirator. Now, comrades, I have done. What shall we do?" The men looked at each other in dismay. A dead silence filled the room, for the mere suspicion of treachery among the men who had solemnly dedicated their lives to the sacred cause of liberty seemed to hold them dumb. Such villainy in their very midst, among men banded together in sacred brotherhood, was a greater crime than the merciless acts of despot and his minions. If this is true, said the professor in a voice of suppressed rage, then I will no longer believe in human fidelity or the future of our cause, but death. If the story is true, which of us is the informer? Added the speaker, staring fiercely at the pale faces of his companions. Ah, it is useless to ask that, my dear professor, exclaimed Ivan. Such was the name of the youth who had brought the strange intelligence as he advanced to the door of the room, locked it, and placed the key in his pocket. Everyone will assert his innocence, of course. But, comrades, suppose we endeavor to find out. Let us search each other. The traitor, whoever he may be, must doubtless have in his possession some proof of his guilt. At least the experiment is worth trying. What say you? Agreed, agreed, exclaimed the nihilist, as with one accord they sprang convulsively to their feet. One of the students, a tall, lank youth with a somewhat foppish appearance, objected, however, to the proposal. But why? Hotly demanded the professor, who seemed all eagerness to begin the investigation. Because he was the hesitated rejoinder. Because it is unnecessary. Our word of honor ought to be enough. Besides, there is something degrading in the idea of searching one another as if, indeed, we were all a lot of pickpockets. So let us break up the meeting. The excitement is absurd and renders the discussion of our plot impossible. As for the story told by the drunken soldier in the cafe, I don't believe a word of it. These words produced an angry murmur among the excited conspirators. The protest seemed so ridiculous, and as the clamor increased, Ivan turned to the speaker and warmly exclaimed, "Very well, we shall abstain from searching you, since you wish it. But remember this, that if we fail to find a clue to the informant among those who willingly submit to the examination, we shall then know upon whom to fix our suspicions. Now, comrade, search me first. I am ready." In a moment, the speaker's pockets were emptied of their contents, and even the lining of his clothes was carefully searched. But beyond a few old love letters, some political pamphlets, an English newspaper with a paragraph obliterated with a lamp black, nothing of an incriminating character was found. A second student readily submitted to the test, if a test it was, with similar results. Then a third stepped forward and placed himself in the hands of his companions. But at that moment, a curious incident occurred. An invisible hand suddenly extinguished the light of the candle, and in a second, the room was plunged into darkness. What did it mean? Who had quenched the light? For a moment, the nihilist remained motionless, as if rooted to that spot. As they listened in an alarm, they heard a strange creaking sound in the direction of the curtained window. Suddenly, the voice of Ivan exclaimed in the darkness, "Comrades, this is a trick. Listen, someone is endeavoring to escape by the window. It is the traitor at last. His attempt to escape betrays his guilt. Stand back. I know how to deal with him." In an instant, the report of 3 revolver shots rang through the room and was followed by an agonizing yell as someone fell heavily upon the floor. A profound silence then ensued. It was an awful situation. At length, Ivan spoke to his terrified companions. "Strike a light low," he said in a trembling voice, "and let us look upon the face of a traitor. Will no one move? Are you all afraid to gaze upon the dead of a miscreant who has betrayed us to our enemies? Come, Professor, where are the matches? You had them last, but hush. What sound is that? Listen. By heavens, comrades, the police are already upon us. The house is surrounded. Quick, here is a trap door known only to myself. It leads to the main sewer, and this is our only hope to escape. Follow me." Groping hand in hand in the dark, the affrighted men followed the speaker's directions, and after some momentary confusion, disappeared into a noisome abyss. None too soon. In an instant, the door of the room was battered to pieces, and a company of gendarmes entered. Lights were now flashed in every direction, but it was obvious to all that the conspirators had escaped. The officer in charge swore long and deep and ordered the men to search the house from top to bottom. Then, advancing toward the window, he stumbled over a human body. "What's this?" he exclaimed, examining the dead man's features with the lantern. "Ha! So they have caught you at last, my friend, have they? Well, you played the spy long and well, but it always comes to this in the end." And tearing down the window curtain, the officer threw it over the rigid body of the professor. "Well, you played the spy long and well, but it always comes to this in the end." And tearing down the window curtain, the officer threw it over the rigid body of the professor. This has been Locating the Traitor, published in Short Stories, a magazine of select fiction, Volume 5, 1891, narrated by Conan Stewart for Stories Come to Life on YouTube.